So welcome today to our Vitality Series, episode number 6. Today's topic is optimizing diet to supercharge our health. And thank you so much for joining. This webinar is sponsored by Brighten Heights, which is a first-of-a-kind senior living community located in Pewee Valley, Kentucky, which is just outside of the Louisville area. Brighten Heights will promote a life of healthy living and change among seniors and is expected to welcome residents in 2024. For more information on Brighten Heights, we'd like to ask you to go to our website, which is brightenheights.org. Here in a moment, I will introduce our guests for today, but I'd just like to do a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, feel free to ask questions through the chat window, or if you're joining us through Facebook Live, feel free to leave your questions in the comments. We will monitor them throughout, and we will ask them at the end of the webinar. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Wes Youngberg. His primary focus is in his daily practice at his clinic in Temecula, California, which is focused on lifestyle medicine. He is an assistant clinical professor at the School of Medicine and Public Health at Loma Linda University, and a fellow and founding director of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. He has written 3 books, Goodbye Diabetes, Hello Healthy, and Memory Makeover, and regularly speaks and writes publications on these topics. I'd also like to introduce our new guest for today as Chef Ken Rubin. Chef Ken currently serves as the Chief Culinary Officer of Ruby, where he educates on clean living. He is a nationally recognized chef, educator, food anthropologist, and more with 25 years of culinary experience. If you'd like to learn more about Chef Rubin's work, visit www.ruby.com. Now, let me tell you how to spell that. That's Rouxbe. So now I'd like to turn it over to our 2 speakers, but let me just tell you, our format's going to be different today. There's no planned PowerPoints and things like that. They're actually going to interview each other, which we think is going to be a fascinating and fun discussion on all things related to food. And I guess really nothing's off the table as a result. So with that, I will turn it over. I don't even know who to turn it over to first, so I'm just going to turn it over, and someone between the 2 of you gets to decide. Thank you.
Well, I'll start out. Chef Ken, it's a privilege to have you in our Vitality series. I know that Susan has been excited about this for a long time now, and we've had the opportunity to dialogue via our internal Zoom meetings for the last couple of months, and we were impressed by the fact that, you know, as many Zoom sessions as I've been doing this past year, you've been doing a lot more, over 700 or 800 Zoom sessions in the last year. So you've been busy online. You've been busy in many ways, Chef Ken. So we're glad to have you on today.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and really looking forward to this opportunity to have a conversation around food and healthy living, around living our best lives. And, hopefully one of the things we can talk about today are really, what are those things that we should be thinking about, those actual steps, those behaviors, those action items, those lived experiences that we should all be talking about and looking forward to. So that when we talk about food and cooking, it's not conceptual or theoretical, but really gets into people's homes, to their dinner tables, and helps them unwind some of those challenges, some of those points of friction that we know exist for people when they're trying to modify a diet or adopt new ways of cooking. So it's a pretty great topic to dive in.
So now, Chef Ken, you know, you've been doing this a long time, for a quarter of a century or more, and you don't look that old, but that's the value of eating a plant-strong diet, right? That it keeps you young, right? I mean, that's one of the benefits of this. It's not just having a long life, but having a really good life, and where 60s, 40s or 40s the new 60 and 60s the new 80 and so forth. And so we hope that those that are participating in our program today will gain some real insights from our discussion back and forth. We did already have a couple questions that came in. I thought we'd just kind of start with that, since we want to encourage people to ask questions. throughout this live session. And this question that came in is kind of one of the questions that I'm sure, Chef Ken, that you've received many times. I certainly have. And so we can start dialoguing about this and then expand from that discussion into other things that we want to discuss today. And here's the question. I am a healthy 70-year-old female and have been on a vegan diet for the past year. I have been challenged keeping on weight, and I'm trying to maintain good protein intake so that I don't lose muscle mass. My understanding is that sprouts such as broccoli, lentils, etc., are very nutrient dense. I have been primarily using sprouts as one of my primary protein sources, along with seeds, brown flax, hemp, chia, etc., nuts, quinoa, vegetables, and beans. I eat a well-balanced diet with a lot of vegetables and salads, berries, and some other fresh fruits. I was wondering if this would be considered a good way to assure I get adequate protein. Wow, if I had $1 for every time I was asked a question like, well, where are you getting your protein? And before I throw this to you because I know you have a lot of insight on this, Chef Ken, I'm thinking of one of my colleagues, Brenda Davis. I imagine you've connected many times with,
Sure.
with Brenda Davis. She's my favorite dietitian in the world. We're actually very good friends, and we've spoken on the topic of diabetes and other chronic disease management at various conferences together. Just a real pistol, just a real high energy lady, and she tells the story. In fact, Dr. Hans Diehl tells the story when I was speaking at a CHIP conference at Loma Linda University, where he was actually introducing Brenda Davis, and I was just there to hear her speak before I went on to onto my topic. And he tells this story. He says that she had been speaking at another international conference, and somebody in the back raised their hands and say, okay, all right, you guys are talking about a plant-based diet and a vegan diet. Says, maybe you're really healthy. Maybe you'll live to be 110 years old, but I bet you can't even do one push-up. And, it's really addressing this very question about, am I going to lose muscle mass? Am I going to get weak? And in some people's mind, there's this perception of somebody that doesn't eat meat or chooses to eat a plant-based diet is going to be compromising their physical health. They're going to become weaker and more frail. And without rebutting in any verbal way, she's, remember Brenda Davis? She's this cute, petite lady. She was wearing her beautiful red dress all the way down to her ankles. She dropped to the floor and did 55 push-ups. Boom, 55. And then basically asked us, would you like to come up and match me on that? And basically it shut him up, and realized that there's definitely things that we can do to optimize our health, but with diet and exercise. And so one piece of the answer to this really good question is that when somebody gets on an optimal diet, and let's just say they start resculpturing their body composition, because they're no longer maybe eating a high fat diet or a high free fat diet, a lot of oils. And so now their body starts to sculpture, and maybe they lose some of the extra weight that they had, even though they might not thought of that as extra weight. Well, anytime you lose weight, you're going to lose some muscle mass with that, because part of your muscle mass is associated with carrying around that weight. But if you exercise appropriately and optimally, where we're dovetailing effective exercise protocol along with an optimal dietary protocol, you greatly minimize any potential to lose that extra protein. And so if you're losing weight, you might be losing fat weight, but you're not necessarily losing protein weight. So I could go on and talk about the nuances there. But first, I want to throw this to you, Chef Ken. What are your thoughts, or as you've dialogued with people for decades on this very topic? Like, wait a minute, as you have taught over what 600,000 students that have gone through your culinary training program at Rubin. What do you say to them when they bring up that question?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think you're spot on in terms of the overall framing of the question around this bias towards people who are vegetarian or plant-based being somehow not getting all that they need to be optimal, to be high-level performance. In other words, people think that you can live as a vegetarian or be plant-based, but you can't really excel and be high performance. And that's just not the truth. I mean, there's a film called Game Changers that came out fairly recently that shows you some of the most elite athletes in the world who are plant-based, and they can speak to all the benefits of why they chose that diet in particular as part of their, not just their performance kind of process, but really recovery and other things that fit with their larger value systems, let's say. When it comes to the question around, working with a lot of cooks and chefs in the space who were asking the question, well, I want to make foods or learn to cook foods for people who are adhering more to a plant-based or plant-strong diet. What are the things I can do to put on the plate that are going to feel filling and have the caloric density and have kind of the heavy lift in terms of people feeling like, wow, yeah, I can understand. I'm going to feel full. I'm going to have my protein and that sort of a thing. And number one, I tell people, most people who are living in a plant forward or plant strong or plant-based type lifestyle are absolutely meeting their protein requirements if they do indeed eat a diversity of whole food, plant-based type ingredients, right? They're eating a variety of vegetables. They're eating a variety of legumes and nuts and seeds and various other things. It's not like they're just broccoli or just lettuces or that sort of thing. But you're eating a big variety. Chances are much better than not that you have no issues at all around protein in particular. If you do have issues around protein or concerns around protein, there's some really simple, higher protein type foods that you can begin to incorporate. Things like broccoli would be in that category because they're so protein dense in terms of the caloric contribution. But other more obvious foods, whether it's like legumes or any of the foods in that kind of bean family that have carbs and proteins, or nuts and seeds, which have fats and proteins, would work really well. Part of what I've tried to do is help people understand that you might be scared of some of those foods. You might have been raised in a household that didn't cook those foods well, or you never had them taste good to you. And I want to really help you understand how to incorporate those foods into your lifestyle. So when you hear the word bean, you don't think, the can of ranch beans from the cookout that you had when you're eating a hot dog and they're just sugar and whatever else in those. Or you don't think, the one broccoli dish that maybe your grandmother made and she boiled it for 4 hours and you couldn't even tell it was broccoli. Like, we're talking about real food that you get to help prepare and have some determination over it. If you like garlic, if you like spicy, if you like crispy, if you like soft, we're going to help you cook foods that are going to work for you, because ultimately, if you're not eating them, this is all very theoretical, very conceptual, right? So we want to be able to translate it so that you actually enjoy it and want to make that part of the repetition of your life, right? Part of your lifestyle, part of what becomes more the normative behavior versus those outlier things that become, oh, that was cool to try that, or that was interesting to try a smoothie or whatever it is. And to say, yeah, I should be eating these things regularly and reaping the benefits by how you feel, how you perform, how you sleep, all those other things.
Yeah, so it's so interesting, Chef Ken, that when I was a student at Loma Linda back in the early '80s, that was the era of Dave Scott, who won the Ironman triathlon 6 times. He was just an amazing athlete, and he was completely plant-based. And he did that in part because he knew that his performance during triathlons would be optimal if he was plant-based. And as you mentioned, the film Game Changer, there's so many examples there of current athletes that are taking advantage of a plant-strong diet, that are basically primarily eating plants, because they find that when they do that, they excel in their potential. They optimize their potential to succeed in the athletic arena. So it's I had the opportunity I ran the very first LA marathon, did it 2 more times, and then decided I was going to stick to basketball. But yeah, the plant-based diet has always been, from a research standpoint, the most effective diet to help people succeed in their athletic agendas. We think of Rip Esselstyn, the son of Caldwell, Dr. Esselstyn. And I don't know the son, but I know the father very well. He was on our advisory committee with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine for many years, and he's spoken at our conferences on a regular basis, and had made a great contribution to science on how you could so effectively reverse heart disease on a 100% plant-based diet. And but Rip, being a gifted athlete, had won many competitions as a 100% plant-based athlete. So we can completely dispel the myth out there that is still somewhat prevalent in those who haven't seen Game Changers, right? That you're sacrificing athletic performance or physical strength when you go plant-based, and it's just simply not true.
So can I interject, because I'm curious if this might be part of the nature of the lady's question. She said she's doing plant-based, but she's having a hard time from keeping the weight on, like she's losing weight. My question is, should she maybe be adding a little bit of starch or a little more carbs?
Okay, so yeah, we were going to get to that. I'm glad you brought that up, because there's so many ways we can take this discussion. Just real briefly, she's eating various starches already, but you're right, maybe not enough. If she's losing weight, she should increase her caloric intake, right? And so as Chef Ken mentioned, a plant-based diet isn't about just eating salads and broccoli. As good as those are, right? As important as those are, I promote a diet that I call the 3-cube diet, where you're getting 3 servings of green leafy vegetables daily, 3 servings of colorful non-starchy vegetables. That includes maybe even some fruits like berries, and then 3 servings of the sulfur-rich vegetables like onions and mushrooms and purple cabbage and things like that. So this 3-cube diet is not the only things that you eat. It forms the foundation of making sure that you're getting lots of these highly nutritious plant-based plants, right, that are going to help heal your body, right? That they set the basis for. In fact, the 3-cube diet came originally from an anti-inflammatory, anti-autoimmune diet, a diet that was designed to help reverse autoimmune disease in people that had been told they're going to have this disease for the rest of their lives, the rest of their shortened lives. Okay, and when we switch to this approach, we dramatically lower our risk. Now, but if somebody's starting to lose weight where they don't need to be losing weight, then clearly we need to add the second phase of this, which is optimal amounts of healthy whole plant-based starches, and then also getting into the idea of not being afraid of foods that are higher in fat, like avocados, olives, nuts, and seeds. There's especially somebody like that who's healthy, who's losing weight, not trying to, then you just need to increase your calories from both starches and healthy whole fat foods. Chef Ken, any expansion on that topic from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think you've given a really good overview in terms of helping to kind of unwind some of the dynamics at play here. I think like food is always very complex because it's about decision making every day, but I absolutely agree that in this particular example, the idea of increasing the overall caloric base would be, probably on the right path. What's always fascinating to me, though, just as kind of an observation, when I speak to people about, how much to eat, how I'm feeling, how full am I, these sorts of things, everyone is really different. Some people go into more of a plant-based diet and feel really full, right? They're eating tons of fiber. They're doing a lot of eating. They're eating multiple times a day, not just 2 big meals. And, some people respond, wow, I'm eating all the time. My plate is big. I'm always full. And some people are like, I'm full, and then I'm not full, right? So it's really a matter of figuring out what are those foods that keep you feeling satisfied. If a handful of nuts or seeds in the afternoon is a thing that really kind of keeps you feeling full or keeps your energy in a certain place in the afternoon versus a handful of berries or versus some other thing, great. We're all a little bit different. Our kind of metabolic timing throughout the day is a little bit different. And I think a lot of this is just coming to the realization that when you do strip out the processed foods and you do strip out incredibly high caloric density foods like dairy and animal products, and you leave it to nuts and seeds and plant foods, that you wind up having this incredible amount of calories to kind of play with. And people are always amazed to say, wow, that bowl of vegetables is 60 calories. It's a big bowl, right? So people don't really understand that you could really fill your belly, but not be getting a caloric base that can sustain you and still be on a weight loss path. Always surprising for people. Now the nuts and the seeds can change that very, very quickly, obviously, but not as quickly as it is eating a bag of chips or wolfing down a bunch of melted cheese. Like that's even easier to go. So
Yeah, of course, we started out with a question, since it was one of the questions that was initially brought to us based on this show that we were going to do. But the reality is that most people are in a different camp, right? Maybe many people that I work with, at least, are they're going like, I can't lose weight. I'm trying to lose weight. I can't lose weight. I'm really struggling, and I'm struggling with pre-diabetes or diabetes or brain fog. I can't concentrate. I'm concerned about the development of dementia over time. And, what can I do with the diet? So the good news is that when we learn through the proper channels on how to apply a plant-based diet effectively, then we're going to begin to lose those unwanted pounds, right? I had a patient recently, started about 8 years ago, who's 90 years old, who was 70 pounds overweight, diabetic, out of control diabetic. We just discovered that from doing glucose tolerance tests. And so he says, what are we going to do about this? And so we initiated an optimize the diet. And he just decided to go to 2 meals a day because he was 90 years old. Didn't think he needed to eat that 3rd meal a day. I said, okay, let's try that. Started walking after meals. And to make a long story short, in less than a year, back in 5 weeks, he reversed his diabetes. In less than a year, he reversed his pre-diabetes. In about a year's time, a year and a half's time, he lost 65 pounds. And now at the age of 98, his blood sugars are better than average college students. He doesn't have pre-diabetes or diabetes. And that's because he got on a protocol and he followed it and he maintained it. And as long as we're doing the right thing, we're going to get the results. But one of the questions I want to ask you, Chef Ken, is what about the more average individual that they start to recognize that they need to change, right? Something's got to change because of heart disease or diabetes or dementia creeping in, other illnesses, chronic illnesses that developing, and so they now become convinced that they need to change, but inwardly they may be groaning because of their perception that, man, I'm not going to like this. It's I had one patient once tell me, said, Doc, if you tell me I got to eat barbed wire, then doggone it, I'm going to eat barbed wire. So he had this kind of mentality that this was going to be horrible, but he was going to do it because he was going to do it, right? And so I'm thinking, wow, you got the wrong perception here. I love what I eat, right? One of my favorite things about breakfast is my stir-fried vegetables. I don't even need to use oil. I just stir-fry a whole bunch of vegetables together, and I love it. That's my favorite part of breakfast. I wouldn't have thought of that years ago, but now you develop a sense of joy, of expectation about what you're going to do. So what advice do you have, Chef Ken, for individuals that, they may be listening or watching this live or in the future on YouTube, and they're thinking, man, I know I got to change, but man, I'm not looking forward to this. Do I have to just kind of fake it till I make it? What have you learned about the joy of this process?
Yeah, well, I think using the word joy is really powerful. I think that for me, I recognize, since I work with people of all stripes who come to cooking not out of a desire to learn to cook or a love of cooking, but because they kind of, in many cases, have to learn to cook. It's part of their plan. It's part of their solution to have a sustainable path to stay better, right? Once they're better. So for a lot of it, it's really about identifying what are those things that cause friction or pain or confusion. Where are those points in your narrative around food that you've identified as being things that are points of discomfort or trauma, even in some cases? And let's really try to understand what that is. We don't have to address all of them at the same time or all of them at once. We're not going to get there all in one day, but let's just begin to address some of those things. And I always have people essentially start.
Psychologist.
Everyone is so different.
You should actually provide a degree in that in your school, culinary psychology, culinary health, dietary psychology.
It's completely helping people to re-envision what it is they're going to have as their story, as their as the ways in which they identify how meaning and food touch each other. That's not going to be negative and not self-defeating, right? So that's what we're trying to get at. So it's really introducing to people what are those first steps that make sense for that person. And everyone is a little different. Some people come in and say, I get it. I bought into the science. I'm not disputing that I have to. I really just don't have the sensibilities or the skills. So if you can teach me how to do 3 or 4 things over the course of a week or 2, that at least gives a person some things to begin to work on, to practice. It's like if someone was completely out of shape and you were to say, hey, let's get you on a path so that maybe one day you can run 5 miles. You don't go run the track on day 1. You help them put their shoes on. You probably walk around the block. You probably do things like, hey, here's how you walk a little bit faster, or here's how you do some other thing that you can stretch after you're done walking. I kind of approach cooking the same way. For people coming into it, it could be step 1 is, well, let's just look around your refrigerator. Let's look in your house and say, oh, some of these foods are clearly not part of your future. Let's just get rid of them and put some better things, not maybe the perfect thing, but let's just put some better options in there. So we can, from your environmental perspective, begin to acclimate to there being some fresh fruits on the counter, or something that's a vegetable that you can just eat after it's been cut up or portioned, like sliced up bell pepper, sliced cucumber. Not a salad, because that's sometimes for people, I don't like salad, asking a lot, but I'll eat a sliced cucumber. That's cool, I got it. It's a different expectation. So helping people with those initial steps and then really finding out that, you know what, that knife stuff was easy. I liked holding a knife. I thought it was kind of fun chopping that thing up. That was cool. I got to chop it really small. I like it really small. Giving people that little tiny bit of purpose so that the next time they tell a story, it's a slightly better story. In other words, so went from being food is horrible, not my friend, cooking is impossible, I'll never get it right, to, I bought a cucumber and I cut it up and the cuts weren't very even, but yeah, it was kind of fun. I got to cut up a cucumber and wow, I spent 65 cents on a cucumber. I would have spent $4 if I bought the cut up cucumber at the salad bar. Those sorts of things, they realize I can do this. You give those people an introduction to the joy, to the possibility, to the promise, and that they have agency, they have power in themselves to do really small things that over time make a really big difference. And for some people, it's just acknowledging that that food that they thought they hated, actually not that bad. Maybe they don't love it. We're not getting them to love. We're not getting them to the marathon. But the fact that they go from hating it, won't even look at it, to, well, gosh, I guess cooked the right way, I could eat it. Or if it's cut up really small, I'll eat it. Great. And that's a much different place to bring a person from, when my ultimate goal is to get them comfortable with a half a dozen cooking techniques, being able to identify 20 or 30 fruits and vegetables so they can say, oh yeah, I know what that is. That looks fresh. I'm going to buy that. It looks really fresh. Or versus, what is that thing? Do you eat that? Do I eat the skin? Like, never heard of it, right? So giving people some basic literacy so that when they begin to go out in the world and they're telling a story, that their friend, their partner, their coworker says, wow, that's cool. You're eating cucumbers. Nice. Like, just a pat on the back. And little things like that go a long way to normalize that new person, that new self, that new sense of I can do it, versus food is keeping me down, or that sort of a narrative.
Well said. I know that
Yep.
there's a lot of people watching this thinking, hey, that's exactly me. I need to actually learn how to do this. So now I know, Chef Ken, that at rubidough.com, you have this, well, the world's leading online culinary school, and you teach professionals, how to do this in their profession. What do you have available? What you've been just talking about right now. Like, if I wanted to go through some type of training program online, is that something you have available as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, with Ruby, we have lots of different products and services that help people step into cooking. People at all different levels of need. We do a lot of training for professionals as well, as you indicated. But a lot of people who come to us who are not professionals are really looking for those basic lifestyle skills. They're people who are on a health or wellness path. And because Ruby, at the beginning of its founding, was really designed to be a cooking school, we take this approach around cooking technique and cooking method as the primary force of driving people to learn, versus the way a lot of websites or a lot of online resources approach it, which is very much based on recipes, or based on this idea of giving a lot of nutrition information and fingers crossed they're going to do something with it. We start with the assumption that there's a lot of other great recipes out there. There's a lot of people, you, Dr. Youngberg, other people providing great nutritional information. We want to really be at that point of activating a person. So your doctor said, hey, you got to change something. You got to eat more vegetables. Try eating more leafy greens. And you're scratching your head going, well, how do I do that? How do I actually do that? And a recipe might not actually help you very much, because we want to figure out, well, we might not even have the skill to execute that recipe. If you don't know how to hold a knife, or if you describe what you just, we're talking about with a dry stir fry or a dry saute without oil, person scratching their head going, well, how in the world do you do that? Well, we'll provide the videos. So when we say heat a pan with no oil and put your onions in, and here's what it should look like and sound like, and here's how you add your stock to flash it to make it release, and all these steps, people go, wow, yeah. And like, it's just fire. It's just heat and a piece of metal with food on top. Like, we're just taking out the oil and all the other stuff that used to kind of bungle it up and make it, 4 times more caloric, and not adding anything for you. So, and they go, wow, no one ever said I was allowed to cook this way. It was like, well, now you have permission, you can cook this way. So we very much like to come in with that mode and say, like, really how to hold a knife, really how to take those broccoli florets off that broccoli, how to cook with the frozen vegetables. How do you know when your brown rice is done? Like, we're going to help you understand those things that for me transcend the recipe or transcend the cookbook or those sorts of things. We want to be this resource that helps you use any or all of those other resources out there.
So specifically, Chef Ken, what is the actual name of that service or program or online school that you have that people can go right to, knowing that what you're referring to right now, they would get that information in that program?
So we have a few. There's two that I'll call out though. One is our Plantrition Project program called Culinary RX. And Plantrition Project is an amazing organization, just amazing physicians, wonderful people, kind of leading the way for physician education around some of these topics that we've spoken about. That Culinary RX course is really designed to be a quick step into some of these plant-based principles that we've talked about. We also have a program that Ruby developed in collaboration with the Forks Over Knives group. And many of you who are in the space know Forks Over Knives, kind of the impact of that story. And it was really early on one of the ways that people got excited about the movement. But we had an opportunity about 5 years ago to partner with them. And I had the privilege of co-developing and kind of co-teaching for many years the Forks Over Knives cooking school. So it has a lot of the same principles of whole food, plant-based, no additional processed oils, very low sodium, really focusing on getting people in the kitchen and understanding that, there is joy in cooking, that it's not going to happen overnight. But with our system, we just really try to walk people through a process, highly supported with my team, with our chefs that we have, so that when a person goes through an activity, and I'll give you an example of an activity, they go through an activity, they get feedback and they get personal attention. So one of our activities that we have in our course is about cooking broccoli and using submersion cooking techniques to cook broccoli to 3 different levels of doneness, right? Very, very basic. You're basically heating up water, dropping broccoli in it, and you're cooking it for 3 different time frames, right? One is less cooked, one is a little bit more, and one is even more than that. And we have people go through what is a very elementary process, right? We're just cooking broccoli in water at 3 different timestamps. And for people who have never done that or never even tasted broccoli cooked at 2 different levels or 3 different levels of doneness, it is a complete eye-opener for those people. They cannot believe, number one, how different it tastes, how different it feels in their mouth, and that many of them have a strong preference for one of them. And many of them, it's not the one they thought. It's amazing. They say, wow, I really like the more raw broccoli, or I really like the one that's very cooked and actually pretty soft. Not 4 hours cooked, but 4 minutes cooked. But everyone always said, oh, just steam it for a minute, and a minute was never enough. Or if I cut my broccoli smaller, well, a minute made great sense in that case, right? Because time and temperature and vegetable size are all kind of related. So we turn people's brains on so that the next time they cook broccoli, or really any submersion cooking, right? They're simmering a vegetable, applies to steaming as well. They're able to discern doneness. They're feeling something different in their mouth. They're thinking about how green is that vegetable still? How much chlorophyll has been retained? They're thinking about, did that become sweeter when I cooked it a little bit? Will I eat a lot more of it because it's softer and I can actually just get it down faster? We get people thinking about these things so that the next time they go and cook, it's in their brain, right? We planted that. So they're never going to do submersion cooking exactly the same again. In fact, they say, I'm 47 years old. I've never thought about cooking broccoli like this until you put it in front of me. So those sorts of activities get people to realize, number one, that you can do it and that you do have a choice, and that this is not about Chef Ken or Ruby or my approach to cooking. This is about finding a way for you to have your approach to cooking so you can tell your own story. That's a positive story. And that's where we're going.
Great. Now, I did want to let you know, we do have a couple questions on here that I think are very appropriate. The first one was, and it's such a broad question, I know we could have a whole discussion on it, so you'll have to think about how to be succinct with answering it, but how do you start being vegetarian? So that's question number one. And then question number two was, so no oil is appropriate for optimum diet. And for a lot of people, that's a shocker. So it probably requires Dr. Youngberg a little bit of explanation as to, or one of you, as to what's wrong with oil. And then, the vegetarian question.
Well, when we're talking about no oil, we're talking about limiting unnecessary fat, unnecessary, especially processed, highly refined fat or oil. And so, in my opinion, I'm not against certain forms of oil when they have their appropriate place, but recognize that the more refined the product is, the less nutrient value it brings. And the more concentrated other things are that may not be what you need. So if somebody is trying to lose fat weight, it makes sense not to use extra types of fat in the form of oil that, number one, are refined. So there's very little nutritional value other than the fact that it's got a lot of fat calories attached to it. So that's one consideration of looking at oil. I'm actually an advocate of moderation of fats in our diet, where I mentioned earlier, using avocados, olives, nuts, and seeds. I eat those all the time. I'm an advocate of the fact that those types of foods, especially whole foods, actually dramatically enhance your ability to absorb other nutrients that you otherwise wouldn't absorb as well unless you had a certain amount of fat, healthy fat, in your diet. But you're stir frying with oil and adding oil for deep frying, some things like that. Those are absolutely not only unnecessary but very harmful. And so there's many techniques, as Chef Ken has been pointing out to us. That's really the answer. How do you get started? I'm loving this discussion because you get started by learning and falling in love with the process of using vegetables and cooking vegetables appropriately. Comments?
No, I love the idea of falling in love with the process. That's so much about what I preach to people is when you have a food conversation, people are really fixated oftentimes on the end result, that final plate. And that's great because that's what you're going to enjoy. But I always get people to stop and think about, what does that look like along the way? How does that inform what you ultimately do? Because that's the thing that you have to relish and take some comfort in really enjoying, because anyone's good at eating when it tastes really good. But just like the running part, you have to enjoy the process, not just the feeling of being at the finish line. So I always really share with people, when you're starting off, what's your first step with becoming more vegetarian or more plant-based? I think it's just getting in there and engaging your senses. It's tasting those vegetables that you haven't tasted maybe in 5 or 10 years. It's touching the food with your hands. It's understanding the crispiness and the softness and the texture and all those things that make it so much more interesting than bland, brown, soft commodity food, right? The vibrancy, the colors, the textures just make this approach to eating just a lot more fun, a lot more interesting. So,
well, if I could interject from a layman's standpoint, I will say, and I know this sounds like we're plugging Chef Ken a lot, and I guess we are, but that's not the point of it. One of the things he's been involved with is what is called the Engine 2 diet, and it's an app that's really easy to use, and I started using it not that long ago. What I love about it is that you go in and you put in your own parameters. Like I primarily cook for me and my daughter, and I put in the size of meals we want to have, how much time I'm willing to spend on it, what food allergies or food aversions we have. Like, sorry, but I can't eat avocado, so I wanted no recipes with avocados, and I have an aversion to Brussels sprouts, so no. But anyway, you get to pick all those things, and then you have a plethora of suggested recipes that come up, and they have, like, for the day, you can choose between 3 for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they're mostly like using a lot of like different kinds of beans, like lentils and cannelli beans. I've just discovered those and I love them. And they're filling and satisfying, and they're healthy, and you don't really have to worry about figuring all that out. So that's a real easy way, in my opinion, to jump on the bandwagon. And certainly there's got to be lots of other options out there similar to that, but that's one I know about, so I just wanted to share it. And the other thing is for someone who's never cooked with like always just eaten meat and not tried to go vegetarian, there's lots of different sources of protein like beans and tofu. And then you can use cashews to make sauces, whether it's salad dressings or gravies, or even like cheese dip that tastes really, really good. And you don't even know that that's what it is. Like if you didn't tell people, hey, by the way, this is cashews in here instead of actual cheese or whatever, or gravy, they wouldn't know. And so you use a lot of like garlic powder and onion powder and things like that to get that taste that really helps you get over the hurdle of making those transitions. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, great suggestions.
Well, there's a lot we could talk about, and I think are we wrapping up this part of the discussion right now? I'm getting a forward nod. So this has been great. Actually, what I love about our discussion so far, Chef Ken, is how you've really instilled in myself and others watching this a renewed interest, really, in being part of the process and recognizing that it's not just about eating a diet that helps you reverse diabetes and helps you actually reverse aspects of cognitive decline and heart disease, etc. As valuable as that is as an endpoint, right? But the actual process, the relationship building process of cooking, of being in your kitchen and inviting a friend or a family member to join you in the cooking process and learning, right, how to use that knife and how to cut properly, how to prepare these recipes that are not only super healthy and good for us, but we're developing this greater bond and relationship with those that we care about.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity to be together. Because sometimes in a lockdown, you're together, but you're not really together. Everybody's vegging out on Netflix or whatever. We're not together actually doing something productive. And 3 times a day, we have an opportunity to do something where we're preparing to enjoy a meal together, but part of that togetherness is preparing it as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that part of the healing power of food comes not just through the consumption, but through the production. So it's the preparation, it's the sharing, it's the time spent, it's the memories that are created in that space. It's all the memories that you have around the way something smells when it's in the process, when it's not quite done. And now that smell of not quite done versus, oh yeah, we're ready to eat. Those things become really important when I think about overall health. Again, not just the nutritional components of eating, but what it looks like to have a healthy human, a healthy person who's engaged and really kind of in that process of betterment, knowing that it's not, a single path, that there's lots of ways to get there and a lot of actions and a lot of decisions we have to do on a daily basis to maintain that.
Well, and one more thing before I transition over to closing out this session. The 3 of us had, or actually the 4 of us had a conference call not too long ago, kind of preparing for this. And I don't even remember how the conversation went, but one of the things you awakened me to was the importance of that social connection with other people in the whole food process. And I'm one of those check it off the checklist type of people that I just want to get point A to point B and very task oriented. So you made me appreciate again, because it's really important to have meals with your spouse and go through the whole process. And so I think we'd be remiss to not really also bring that into conversation and just say that's really part of what's important with the whole food experience. And if you live alone, well, then find friends to get with and make food part of your journey. It's a great experience. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great. We'll have to probably do this again, I'm sure. We'll figure out more things to talk about around food. We all love to talk about food, I think, especially if it's a fun topic. So what I'd like to say is that next webinar is going to be on May 10th at 4 p.m. And Dr. Youngberg's actually going to be talking with us about the benefits of lab testing. And Dr. Youngberg, do you want to just take a moment to maybe put a little pitch behind that, get people thinking about it between now and then?
Yeah, there's this speaks to the reason why some people start recognizing that may not be so much better off if I went plant-based, but as we've discussed today, that inwardly they're groaning about that, when in fact they can learn to not only appreciate it, but to love it, right? In many respects. So the what gets some people started on this path is when they do a deeper dive into understanding what's going on inside their body. That's why we call it internal medicine, right? It's a lab test. Blood lab tests are so valuable because they give us insights as to what's going on, what we may be at risk of right now or in the future that otherwise we wouldn't know. And so I'm going to be highlighting, what I've learned over the last 30 plus years clinically I know I'm always motivated when I see information from my own blood, right? It's like, oh, okay. I had one concept of my health beforehand, but now I realize, oh, maybe I need to do a little bit better. Maybe I need to sit down with the masters like Chef Ken and learn a little bit more how to apply this to my life so that I can address some of these risk factors, whatever they may be. So I'll be sharing with you some really interesting insights. For instance, just especially given the fact that we're in this age of COVID, that we've learned that optimizing zinc levels is critical. We look at the blood level, the serum level of copper compared to the plasma level of zinc. And we can tell whether that copper is primarily bound to ceruloplasm, which is the transport vehicle in the blood for copper, or if it's free floating, causing all kinds of free radical damage, causing oxidative stress in their body. So the diet, the plant-based diet is so powerful because one of the primary benefits is, medically speaking, is that it's powerfully filled with antioxidants that can help change our risk in a dramatic and dynamic way. So I'll be sharing, talking about those labs, looking at what labs are most likely to tell whether we have an early tendency towards dementia, an early tendency towards heart disease, or towards autoimmune disease. We'll be going over all those labs and more next month.
Awesome. And I guess one more plug in that mind that made me think of is you talked about our exposome and genome and things like that, and just turning good genes on and bad genes off, and all that kind of ties into that. So be looking forward to that. And also, I think DNA testing, I'm sure you'll touch on that too a little bit as well, knowing what
Absolutely.
Genetically. So thank you so much, everyone, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.